Shalom, this is Shira Sherbow coming to you from Sfat, Israel, and welcome to our Tour for the Nations Women's Gathering. Tonight we're going to talk about nightmares. This is a true story. This is one woman's nightmare that I heard this week. Okay, she's 19 years old and she's driving down a 4-lane highway, and she's on her way home in Tacoma, Washington, and a little dog darts out on the freeway in front of her car, and she said, "I did the thing that everybody tells you you're not supposed to do." She swerved to miss the dog, and it caused her car to go in a tailspin. She ended up hitting the dog anyway. She said, "Now I know why they tell you not to do this." She ended up in the fast lane of a 4-way highway, facing the wrong way, and her car died, if you can imagine. She thought any second that was it, that she was dead. And there was a man who saw what was happening. He pulled off on the side of the road. He ran, he risked his own life to go through 4 lanes of traffic to get to her and to do what it took to start her car and maneuver her to get her to safety on the side of the road. She said that the man, once he knew that she was okay, he went on his way. He never left his name. And she said, "I'm pretty sure I forgot to say thank you." So this is 20 years later now. She's going back and she's remembering this story of this nightmare scenario that happened on the highway. And she said that in college she became a psychology major, and she often thought about this man, like what causes some people, what goes on in the brains of some people, these altruistic people that make that split-second decision like this man did, that I'm going to risk my life for a complete stranger. So she said she often thought about him and compared like what goes on in the mind of an altruistic person compared to what goes on in the mind, say, of the other extreme, like a psychopath. But this was her study in college. Okay, so there's 2 things going on here. There's the person that's experiencing the nightmare, and then there's everyone else. There's the people that respond in some way or choose not to respond, to keep on driving, or they make the decision like that man, like, I've got to do something, I've got to help. Even if his own life is at risk, even if she's a complete stranger, he doesn't even leave his name. He just goes on his way. Okay, so there's another famous nightmare story about a man that is robbed and beaten and left for dead. You've probably heard of it. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. And if you Google this, in 1973, they did this social experiment on Princeton campus. On Princeton University with theological majors, theologians, people that were studying to be theologians. Okay, so they're very familiar with this story of the Good Samaritan. What it is there's a man that's beaten, left for dead on the side of the road, and a very religious man goes by, just doesn't help him in any way. A second religious man goes by, doesn't help him. Finally, a Samaritan man helps him. He's very compassionate, does everything he needs to do, and he helps him. So if you're called a Good Samaritan, that means that you're very compassionate, very sacrificial, unselfish. So that's what the parable of the Good Samaritan is. So when they did this social experiment, like this candid camera kind of thing, like a hidden camera, what they did was they planted an actor who would act like he was beaten and he was robbed and he was in he was in a need for help, obvious need for help, and they wanted to see how many people would actually stop and help. Okay, so this person, this is just a setup of a person that's experiencing a nightmare situation. But what they did was they had the students start out in building A and tell them that they had to go give their speech in building B. And in between building A and building B, there's an alley. And so this actor was planted in the alley. And so there's a hidden camera to see how many people, the actor would cough when they went by. He would make sure, that they saw him. And they wanted to see which percentage of students would actually stop and help this person. Some of the students were told that they were going to give a speech on the parable of the Good Samaritan. And some of them were told that they were just going to give a speech on the jobs that theology majors got when they graduated. Okay, that didn't seem to have any effect on the results. But what did have an effect on the results was when they were told, you better hurry because they're already expecting you over there. So there were 3 groups of people. One group of students were told they had plenty of time. The next group was told, you better hurry. And the third group was told, you're already late. They've already been waiting for you, so you're extremely late. And this is what had the greatest effect in the group that was told that they were extremely late and they were already waiting for them, when only 10% of them helped to stop this man that was in need. 63% helped when there was no time constraint. So that was a very telling thing that, most people would see themselves as, surely I would never just walk by someone who was robbed and beaten and coughing and obviously needing help. But it's funny how when we are, it showed in this social experiment, when people were in a big hurry, only 10% stopped to help. So that just made me think about my own life and about being in a hurry, because it's one of the things that, being married to my husband for 6 years, this man, it used to make me crazy actually, but I've learned to be more like him now. But he likes to be 15 to 30 minutes early. If he's only 5 minutes early and he's late, he really likes that cushion of getting places on time. And so finally, after being married to him for 6 years, I'm starting to be more like him, and I'm starting to appreciate that relaxed feeling of having plenty of time to get somewhere. And when I heard this study of how being late, affects you, like, 'cause you can think in your mind, I want to be a kind person, I want to do acts of kindness for people, but yet if we're running around and we're late and it's probably going to come into play and we will miss opportunities. So the other day, earlier this week, I happened to just be at the grocery store. I was not in a hurry, and I saw a friend, and I told you one time that when you ask people, usually 99 times out of 100, when you say to somebody, how are you doing? Usually the answer is Baruch Hashem. Everybody says Baruch Hashem, bless God, praise God. Well, the other day I saw someone and I said, how are you doing? And she did not say Baruch Hashem. She said, don't ask. And I said, what? And she said, just don't ask. And she kept saying, and I could tell that she was just obviously upset. And I know for me, if I say don't ask, that doesn't really mean don't ask. It means I'm upset. So anyway, looking back on the situation, when I thought of that, I thought, I'm really glad that I wasn't rushing in and rushing out, and that when I saw my friend and she was obviously upset and saying don't ask, that I had the time to talk to her. I had the time to say, what's the matter? And she got to vent, and that's what she needed to do, just to have that friend, just to be there, to talk, to chit chat. And so I see how this comes into play. Like, if we really want to be that person that is there for people that are going through something, it's best if we have our own stuff under control, where we're not just rushing around. So that's one thing that I learned. But also, this nightmare thing, you see this right there in nature. It's there because, for one, God created the night before he created the day. And I was talking to my little grandchildren, trying to explain to them, just as it's very hard in the beginning. That's the night. If you're learning anything new, if you're learning to play an instrument, if you're learning to ride a bike, if you're learning dance steps, whatever it is you're learning, the night comes before the day. This is a really good thing to teach our children, that it's just built into nature that things are hard before they get easy. The night symbolizes the struggle. And you see this like with a little seed. Imagine telling the seed, like, little seed, you're going to be great. You're going to grow into a huge tree. You're going to provide fruit. You're going to provide shade. You're going to provide homes for birds. This is going to be a great opportunity for you. And so the little seed could get all excited. Wow, I'm going to be this huge tree. But then it's like, oh, by the way, did I tell you you're going to have to be buried alive first? So this is part of nature. What the seed has to go through to be underground in the darkness and break apart. And it's not just, you get to be the tree right away without all of this struggle. So there's this idea in nature that the struggle comes first and then the fruit. The night, the darkness, and then the day. So this is something that we can just be aware of, that this is the way it is. That things usually, darkest before dawn, things are hard before they get easy. And so, like Abraham was told that he and his family were going to be a blessing to the world. And right after that, Abraham experienced his nightmare of going down into Egypt and having his wife taken from him, and just the whole thing. And this scenario plays out like generation after generation with the Jewish people. You see, they're like the suffering servant. They are supposed to be that people that blesses the whole world, but not without the nightmare, not without the struggle, not without all generation after generation of going through the hard times. So like I said, you have the people that are experiencing the nightmare, and then you have other people that are around, and they have the decision to make, like, do I turn a blind eye? Do I do something to help? Okay, and so we see that in Proverbs 31, it's called the virtuous woman, or the woman of valor. There's a certain verse that talks about the woman that gets up in the night. What it is it's Proverbs 31:15. She gets up while it's still night, sustaining her household and giving a portion to her maidens. Now this is really an interesting thing, because King Solomon wrote Proverbs 31. And what our sages say is that each line of this proverb is for a different woman in history. And the woman that they give this verse to is the Egyptian princess. She's the daughter of Pharaoh. And what happens is she witnesses this nightmare that the Jewish people are going through in Egypt when Pharaoh decides to kill all the baby boys. And it says that this princess is Pharaoh's daughter. She's bathing in the Nile, and she hears the baby crying. She sees the baby in the basket. She knows this has to be a Hebrew baby. She sees this whole nightmare situation that the Jewish people as a whole are going through. And it says she reaches out her arm. What is within her reach to do something about, she does something about. There's hundreds of babies being thrown into the Nile River, but this one is within her reach to do something about. So she doesn't say, what good is it to save one baby? So many are dying. This one is within her reach. She reaches out her arm, and I love it that it takes a woman to stand up to Pharaoh. I could just see her saying, I don't think so. I don't think so, Pharaoh. If he said to her, is that a Hebrew baby? Throw him in the river. I could see his daughter just standing up to him going, no, I don't think so. And it just takes someone like that, someone who sees the suffering, someone who risks coming against Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world at that time, and she stands up to him and she saves Moses. And what I really love about it is that she is the one that names Moses. So here the greatest leader of the Jewish people gets an Egyptian name given to him by an Egyptian princess. His parents had named him Tuvia, but that's not the name we all know him by. She was honored because she was the one that saved his life. She was honored with giving him the name. So I have to read you what our sages say about this Egyptian princess, Batya. It says, according to one interpretation of our sages, each verse of A Woman of Valor, that's Proverbs 31, composed by King Solomon, refers to a uniquely outstanding woman in history. Two of these women are Batya and Rahab. They came from cultures steeped in idolatry, and yet each managed to see past the lives they were born into and recognize holiness and embrace it. Now, I did that, and probably if you're watching me, that's what you did. You recognized that there was something going on with the Jewish people, and you grabbed hold of it. That's what I did. You see that this is just century after century, all this suffering is going on with the Jewish people. Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh, she recognized that these people are living this nightmare, and her father was cruel. And so it says that what makes Batya's story all the more compelling is that, as her corresponding verse states, she gets up while it's still night. Night is always a symbol for exile. For during the night, we're surrounded by darkness, unable to see what is real, even if it's right in front of us. In the dark, everything loses its proper form, its proper place, and it's easy to get lost and confused. Okay, so, and yet when we know that following the night will come the day, that right after the dark will be light, we're not only not scared of it, but we're able to face it and work through it, and we're confident that in time the truth will show itself. Okay, so Batya, it says, in Batya we can perhaps see what this relationship looks like when brought into consciousness. She arose while it was still night, when the Jews had no allies in the world other than a God who had not yet redeemed them. She nurtured and raised the child who would eventually lead us out of Egypt. She recognized the beauty and power of the Jews and Judaism, and she risked her own life to shield what she knew to be sacred. It was Batya's ability to act on the truth that she recognized, which elevated her from being Bat Pharaoh, Batya's daughter of Pharaoh, to being truly Batya, the daughter of God. So I love that the daughter of Pharaoh became Batya, the daughter of God. And I think it reminds me of, Moses was raised by Batya, by this Egyptian princess. And she influenced him to be that compassionate, for the underdog, selfless, caring person. And I'm reminded of a scene from one of my favorite movies. You probably have seen Dirty Dancing. There's Patrick Swayze is teaching Baby how to do this dance. And so there's this one scene at the end where Baby's up on stage, she's performing, and her parents are in the audience, and her mother just kind of reaches over and says to her dad, she gets that from me. I think it's just hilarious, because I know as parents, when our children do something, we're always like, oh, he gets that from me, or he gets that from you. So Moses actually got very awesome qualities from Batya, from this Egyptian princess who raised him in the palace. It says that Batya's own act of incredible self-transformation that the sages say influenced Moses, inspiring in him the conviction that significant change is possible. So she was credited with a lot of his good character traits, and she was honored by the fact that we all know him as Moses. We all know him with his Egyptian name, even though he was a Hebrew. So she was honored, and that's why we call Moses the name that she gave him. Okay, so another thing that we should always let our children know, one of the things that we do when we do the Purim play, and Haman is the evil one, and he comes out on the stage, and the kids all have noisemakers, boo, hiss, because it's very important for children, for everyone to know that when evil comes on the stage, you do not keep silent. That's the message. You make a lot of noise. And so it's not okay just to, like, silence means consent. So that's another thing. When people are suffering, when people are going through their nightmares, it's up to us to make a lot of noise, and to object to people suffering. And there's two different things going on that, on the one hand, we want to say, well, everything is for the good, and I know, that I have to trust God. And so when we're going through our own suffering, we can try to rise above it, and we can talk to God about it, and we can say, I know it's for the good, and I'm trusting you. It doesn't feel good right now, but it's like I'm in the dark right now. I know the light is coming. I don't see it right now, but I'm trusting you. But when we see someone else's suffering, we don't have to tell them that it's for the good. We can cry out, we can complain to God on their behalf. We can always go to God and say, God, we can't stand the suffering. Please, and whatever we pray for someone else, this is a great opportunity for God to bless us. I've seen this actually happen. They say, like, if there's something that you're really needing, like if you haven't been able to get pregnant, pray for someone else to get pregnant. And the idea is that God will answer your prayer for them and for you. If you're needing to find your soulmate, pray for someone else to find their soulmate, and He'll answer your prayer for them and for you. I actually saw someone go to the hospital when their brother-in-law was in a very bad state, and he prayed for his brother-in-law. When he left the hospital, he had this experience he felt like all of the back pain that he had been experiencing for years and years, like he felt like his back pain just left him. And also, he struggled with road rage. And he said he felt the anger leave him. And he was just like, I don't know, like something happened, and it was a noticeable difference. And he said, do you think that when I prayed for my brother-in-law, that God healed me of these things? And I had never heard of that before, but now that I know that this happens, I can look back and I can see, wow, that's exactly what happened. So we don't want to be too much in a hurry, because we don't want to miss these opportunities that when people are in need, to help them in some way, to pray for them in some way. And it's an opportunity that God wants to bless us, and so He puts these things in our path. And so it's good to just go through life with a little bit of cushion, a little bit of time, because you never know when these things are going to come up, when they're going to come across your path, and you'll have an opportunity to help someone. So one last thing, there was a very religious man named the Baal Shem Tov, and his wife was combing out the hair of a little girl, and we don't even want to say what was going on in this girl's hair. This is like every preschooler's nightmare. Okay, but this girl had been neglected, and his wife was combing through her hair, and she was crying. The little girl was crying. And the Baal Shem Tov, when he got up to heaven, he was held accountable for the fact that he did not say anything to the little girl that was crying. It was held against him that he was silent. He should have comforted her in some way. So you see that nightmares come in all shapes and sizes. For a 3-year-old, what her nightmare would be, what this 19-year-old on the highway is, what the Jewish people were going through in Egypt, the Good Samaritan story, just my friend at the store. We don't know what people's nightmares are. And so it could be, we are experiencing our own nightmare. So there's all shapes and sizes, and there's a way, like I said, if we're the one dealing with it, we try to rise above it. We try to trust God and make it through the nighttime experience till we get to the day, till we get to see the light of day with it. But when other people are experiencing their nightmares, and then we can totally have every right to just come before God and complain and beg Him to help them. And then He in turn will also help us. Okay, so that's what the nightmares are all about. And so I hope that leaves you with a takeaway to learn what I've learned in the last 6 years. It's a lot better to be early, to have that cushion of time, to just be ready in case something happens, that somebody needs your help, that you need to just be there for someone. So that's our takeaway for today. Just slow down. Don't be stressed. Don't be too busy to help people. All right. Bye for now.